Hey everybody, Gurmy's Coaster Yard here, and in this episode of Germanator Studios, well, let's just say filming this episode was a bit of a roller coaster. Yes, pun intended. Um, Minus this first clip, I did this the other day. So I went through and found the street view, not the street view, but the 3D Google Earth view of Big Promise, the real Big Promise, and I realized I got the roof wrong. um, the roof I did is probably better for a theme park, but I want it to be as accurate as possible. So you can see me putting a slanted roof in. And you'll see I have a screenshot that I'll share of the actual Big Promise in Google Earth 3D form. So here I just made those few adjustments to Big Promise. And aside from that, yeah, this episode was a roller coaster to film. So in my community tab the other day, I posed the question of what I should build in the area behind Big Promise, um, specifically what type of roller coaster I should build. And I started by building a whole bobsled coaster, but the whole thing just felt very crowded and noisy, and it didn't fit in the area the way I wanted it to. I forgot how much space bobsled coasters tend to take up in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, especially if you want to make them like realistic bobsled coasters. So here you can see the POV. I wanted to share it with you because the ride itself, I was not entirely displeased with. Just the way it fit into the area, it felt like it was crowding itself in a little too much. Um, so you can see, and it was, I wanted to have a ride experience that was long enough for everyone to enjoy, like not something that was super short. Um, However, in order to do that, it just with the bobsled coaster, given that I wanted low friction mode on to really get the thing banking up to the sides, but it was just giving me all sorts of issues. So I decided instead, I didn't go with a suspended coaster, which was the other idea I had. I don't know why I didn't think of this to begin with, but ended up choosing to build a powered coaster, and you can see me starting that here. And this is, in many regards, inspired by Alpen Express at Europa Park in Germany. Um, Mainly in the sense that you sort of go in one direction and then the ride, it's hard to explain, but it basically does sort of like a couple helixes and then it goes back next to the station but in the opposite direction and does some more helixes. It's hard to explain without seeing a POV, but you can trust me that the idea was inspired by that, and I realized more than anything that with a powered coaster, you don't need elevation to get the ride going, which is important because the more elevated you are in a theme park, the easier it is to see behind the scenes areas that you are not supposed to see. And it's really up to you as a theme park designer, how much you want to hide things. For example, depending on where you sit on the launched free fall ride we built a few episodes ago, there are actually a few behind the scenes areas that you can kind of see. I mean, you can see out of the park. Um, so in that respect, it sort of breaks the fourth wall. But I want to avoid doing that as much as possible. So I went with the powered coaster because that can stay basically as low as you want. It can definitely stay below a tree line if you want to go the Alton Towers direction with your design. Um, and that's what I settled on. And you can see me working on a sort of a starter layout here. The layout we end up with is, I would say, mostly different from this one, but it's also similar. Um, One of the issues I had with this design is I wanted to design a coaster that fits in with the area because this is also going to be like a subsection of our medieval area. It's going to be like a family area, which is another reason I thought the powered coaster was good because those make great family coasters, especially this one. So this whole area where you can see me sort of laying out the paths now is intended to be more of a family area and sort of a tucked away spot within the medieval land. and I don't know if I wanted to do like a fairy tale theme or a storybook theme or whatever. Haven't decided that yet. But the point being, if I can remember what it was, uh, basically it can be difficult to design a roller coaster when you know you want it to be integrated with the area you're designing it inside of. So the roller coaster had to go through some design changes, and it eventually, um, I you can see here I deleted a portion of the roller coaster, and I believe I go through here in a moment and paint some spots on the terrain, and just I start doing some building where I know I want things to be. For instance, I knew I wanted to have one of the structures that was alongside the pathway. Um, I knew I wanted one of those structures to enclose like a helix, and that's where that gray concrete square is. I'll put a helix there eventually. And I knew I wanted the tracks to either go next to or go over the pathway at some point. Um, so that's another thing I worked on. And here you can see me putting that helix in and sort of designing the ride not in a linear fashion entirely. But from the helix, I was able to map out the rest of the ride. I knew I wanted this back portion to have some more like a figure eight section essentially, and I started trying to design a figure eight, but I didn't quite have enough space to do it the way I wanted. So you'll see eventually it's more of like a double. You'll see how I do it. It's not a figure eight. Both helixes will go in the same direction in the end. But that allowed us to do some more things, some more interesting things with the scenery, as you will see. Um, and it just also allowed us to contain the ride in a nicer way. Um, and we got a nice lengthy ride that's not too long but not too short. It's definitely long enough for one cycle of the train. The Alpine Express at Europa Park does 2 cycles. Um, but nevertheless, here we are. I also changed this front portion of the ride in order to maximize the speed before we do the station flyby, which you may have noticed we're going to do. I wanted to gain some elevation first and have a downward helix, and that just allows the ride to pick up speed easier. Um, in respect to being like a powered ride and having a maximum speed, the Roller Coaster Tycoon version respects that limit very realistically, in that the powered coaster in the game will stay at a consistent speed mostly, but if it's climbing hills, it'll slow down, and if it's going downhill, it will speed up to a certain extent. Um, and so I wanted to gain elevation early on and sort of work our way downward and spend most of the main elements going in a downward direction. And you'll see the ride adheres to that pretty strictly of if it doesn't have to go fast, it won't. I mean, I do have it set to its top speed of 20 miles per hour. I wish I could set it higher, but unfortunately, not even the cheat codes for speed adjustment would let me do that. I think because it's such a specific type of ride. The cheat codes are more for chain lifts, but that's okay. I don't care. If you wanted to have a faster powered type coaster, you could use the mini. I think it's called the mini railway coaster or something, and it's basically a non-powered mine train coaster. Um, this one is called the Mine Ride, um, and using that one, you could use chain lift sections to power the ride essentially. Um, but I didn't feel like going through that hassle. You have a little more design freedom if you are just doing it the way I did it here. And speaking of designing things, here you can see me going through and designing the structure around our helix, and it's just like the other half timber structures we've been doing. Couldn't talk there for a second, but this one, you'll notice on top of the stonework, I did an additional 1/3 height stone wall. And the reason was because I couldn't put the porch pieces in there like normal without intersecting with the track, and that would be very unrealistic and very painful for the riders. So I decided to use the 1/3 height western wall, which still adds a nice wooden trim. And if you're not looking closely, most people probably wouldn't even notice that it's different from the others. Um, but just from the mechanics of the game, I think it's a nice substitute, and that's what matters in the end. And then here I'm just doing the roof like normal. Nothing too crazy. This is really the same design principles as the other half timber houses we've been doing. And you'll see in a little bit, we also carry that over when we design the station for the ride, for the roller coaster. And speaking of the roller coaster, so talking about the theme of this area, I don't know the exact name of the area yet or how I want to do that. You can definitely leave your suggestions in the comments, but I know I want to have like a Candyland, a loose Candyland theme. I don't think I want it to be strictly candy. Like, I don't want to include the candy themed rides in here, um, but I would like to use some of the candy scenery and maybe paint the train to look more snowy, um, just to do something a little different and something that would be fun for families and kids, which is really what I'm aiming for with this section of the park. And then here, you can just see me putting some trees in here. Didn't want to do any complex structures. I wanted the ride to have sort of a diverse, I don't know if diverse is the right word, but I didn't want the ride to feel like everything was scenery. Like, some of it can be more foresty, and then some of it will be more structure like, um, etc. And speaking of structure, I don't even think I mentioned once the castle I built, and I'm pretty sure I saw myself build it towards the back. Nevertheless, I built a castle around the little helix section. Nothing too crazy. Um, I guess I didn't really need to mention it because it really just speaks for itself. Um, anyhow, you can see me here doing the station, like I said, and you'll notice I extended it one block on either side of the actual station pieces for the roller coaster, which is pretty straightforward. That's about how I always design stations. And you'll notice, of course, you'll notice that I did it also one block past our uh, flyby section, and the reason for that, as you'll see soon enough, actually right here, I'm leveling this section of track out, and I'm using a technique we did with the launched indoor roller coaster, where I created a ghost piece and then exited and saved the game before placing that ghost piece. And what that does is it allows you to turn that ghost track piece, I should specify, it allows you to turn the ghost track piece into a scenery item, essentially. Um, I'll warn you again, if you do this, it is a permanent scenery item, which means it'll reappear even if you delete it. Every time you reload the save file, it'll reappear. Um, so you can't see it here because I deleted it before I started this section of the recording. But when I reload it for the future section of the recording, which will be after this film segment, I believe, you'll see where that ghost track is there. And basically, it was a very, very roundabout way of explaining that I wanted to create a fork track, which is, I mean, really just a transfer track for the hypothetical train, or the train I should say, to hypothetically transfer off the ride and into a maintenance slash storage area. In most cases, it's common for amusement parks to have a separate storage track for their roller coaster trains, and this goes for pretty much every modern roller coaster that I know of. I can't speak for every ride because every ride is different and every ride has different procedures, and not all rides use storage track all the time. But I like to have them for my rides, especially like in a theme park like this. In theory, a high capacity theme park might have an extra train on hand, so that could be something that's sitting in that maintenance bay ready to go if the first train has an issue. But within the lore, I guess, of my storyline, I've figured more or less it's just a storage area in case they need to do maintenance work on the train and need a little more access to it or need it behind the scenes. Um, and you'll see how I approach that later on. Here for this flyby, I did something that was sort of inspired by the various station flybys I've seen on GCI coasters. The one I'm thinking of specifically from my vague memories. I can't believe they're vague now, but they're 5-year-old memories of Europa Park with Wodan Timber Coaster. They had like a netting, I believe, or a cage sort of around between the station and the flyby section. And I usually do that for my flybys just to ensure that, because that's technically a low zone, it's a prohibited area with a moving roller coaster train going through there. So I like to put the little fence piece in there, and I embellished it a little by using the wooden porch beams on along the one side of it, as well as along the top, the 1/3 height western wall. And I thought that worked really well. And then here I'm just finishing off the back side of the build. And here you can see that where that ghost piece has now turned into a scenery piece, and I'm putting a catwalk underneath it. Um, this is pretty straightforward, and putting the girder pieces in, again, straightforward, it speaks for itself. And then part of the reason I wanted the catwalk is because in a moment, at some point, I put a little staircase in there up to it, and I figured that staircase would also be how maintenance workers could access the maintenance bay if they need to work on the ride or work on the train. And I put the stairs in what I thought was the most logical spot, and obviously enclosed them because that is a restricted area while the ride is operating. So if you have areas that should be restricted, this is just a design tip, but always try to put fencing around them. Any areas you don't want peeps to access, even though within the constrictions of Roller Coaster Tycoon itself, peeps won't be able to access anything that's not on a path or connected to a path. Um, for the sake of realism, try to put fencing around restricted areas and try to make it look nice too if you can. Um, but I always default to the chain link fence. Oh yes, and then I was gonna get to this point a while ago. You saw me messing with the candy cane scenery piece there, and I forgot to do anything with it after I built these ramps. In fact, these are the last thing I'm gonna do, I believe, before the end of the video and before the POV. But I mentioned wanting to make this a sort of candy themed area, and my name idea for this ride is the Candy Cane Train. I think it sounds pretty good, but if you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments below. And for once I finish on time, have a great rest of your day. Here's the POV, and have a good one. See you in the next episode. Bye.